Commander Jake Morrison gripped the metal railing on the bridge of the human warship New Horizon. Red lights flashed all around him as enemy fire hit their ship again and again. The bridge shook so hard, the 2 crew members fell from their chairs. "Shields! Down to 30%, shouted Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. Her voice was calm, even though sweat ran down her face. "Hull damage on decks 5 through 8. Jake looked at the main screen. It showed dozens of enemy ships surrounding. The human fleet. The Vorthan Empire had brought their best warships to destroy humanity once and for all. Their ships were bigger, faster, and had better weapons than anything humans had ever built. "How many of their ships are out there?" Jake asked. 67 Vorthan warships, sir," replied the tactical officer. "We have 23 ships left." "In our fleet," Jake nodded. The numbers were bad, but humans had faced worse odds before. The difference was that this time they were fighting in space, far from home, with no way to get help. The battle had started 3 hours ago. The Vorthan fleet had jumped into the system, expecting an easy victory. Their admiral, Kelixer, had told his crews that humans were new to space war and would run away after the first few shots. He was wrong. The human ships had formed a tight formation and started fighting back immediately. But the Vorthan weapons were too strong. Human ships were getting damaged faster than they could fight back. "Direct hit on the Iron Eagle," reported the communications officer. "They're losing power." Jake watched as the human destroyer Iron Eagle took another blast. From a Vorthan cruiser, the ship's lights went out, and it started drifting away from the battle. On the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kelixer smiled as he watched the human ship go dark. "Another one down," he said to his officers. "These humans fight bravely, but they cannot win against our technology." The alien admiral was tall and thin, with blue skin and forearms. He had won battles against dozens of other species in the galaxy. Humans would be no different. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "the human ship Iron Eagle is moving again." Kelixer looked at his screen. The damaged human ship was indeed moving, but something was wrong. Bright flashes of light were coming from the ship's hull. "What are they doing?" "It appears they are repairing their ship, sir." "During the battle?" Kelixar's voice rose in surprise. "That's impossible. No species repairs their ships while fighting, but that's exactly what was happening." Inside the Iron Eagle, Chief Engineer Pete Williams was crawling through a corridor filled with smoke and sparks. He carried a welding torch and a bag of spare parts. "Carter, I need you to reroute power from the kitchen to the weapons," he shouted into his radio. "Already on it," Amy Carter replied from the bridge. She was working at 3 different control panels at once, her fingers flying over the buttons. The ship shook as another enemy blast hit them. A pipe burst near Pete's head, spraying hot steam everywhere. He ignored it and kept working. "This is crazy," muttered one of the junior engineers. "We should abandon ship." "Not happening," Pete said firmly. "The ship isn't dead until I say it's dead." He reached a damaged section of the hull, where a hole the size of a car had been blown through the metal. Space was visible through the gap, and the ship was losing air fast. Pete pulled out a metal plate from his bag. It wasn't the right size, but it would have to do. He began welding it over the hole, while the ship continued to shake from enemy fire. On the bridge of the New Horizon, Jake watched in amazement as the Iron Eagle's weapons came back online. The ship began firing at the Vorthan cruiser that had damaged it. "How did they do that?" asked the tactical officer. "They fixed it," Jake said simply. "While we were fighting." The idea hit him like lightning. Human ships were getting damaged, but they didn't have to stay damaged. They could be fixed, even during battle. "Get me Chief Engineer Danny White," Jake ordered. Danny's face appeared on the screen. He was covered in oil and looked exhausted. "Sir, we've got damage all over the ship. I've got teams working on it, but it's going to take hours." "How long to fix the main weapons?" "Maybe 30 minutes if we're lucky." "Do it," Jake said. "And Danny, don't worry about making it perfect. Just make it work." Danny grinned. "Now you're talking my language, sir." Across the human fleet, the same thing was happening. Engineers were crawling through damaged ships, fixing what they could with whatever they had. Weapons that had been destroyed were rebuilt using parts from other systems. Hull breaches were patched with metal plates, meant for something else entirely. The Vorthen Admiral watched his tactical screen with growing confusion. Human ships that had been nearly destroyed were coming back to life. Some were even fighting. "Better than before. This is not possible," he said. "Our intelligence reports said humans were primitive." "Perhaps our intelligence was wrong, sir," suggested his tactical officer. On the human ship Braveheart, Captain Neil Johnson was coordinating repairs while still fighting. His ship had lost half its weapons, but his crew was building new ones. "From spare parts, Johnson to all ships," he broadcast. "Share your spare parts. If your neighbor needs something you have, give it to them." Soon, small supply ships were flying between the human warships during the battle, delivering parts and materials. The Vorthen weapons fire made it dangerous, but the human pilots didn't seem to care. "They're treating this like a construction project," observed the Vorthen science officer. "They're not following any known rules of space warfare." Admiral Kielixer had commanded fleets for over 40 years. He had never seen anything like this. Enemy ships were supposed to get weaker. As they took damage, not stronger. "All ships, focus fire on the human flagship," he ordered. "We end this now." The Vorthen fleet turned their attention to the new horizon. Dozens of energy beams struck the human ship at once. Jake felt the deck plates beneath his feet buckle from the impact. "Hull breaches on 12 decks," reported Amy Carter. "We're losing life support. Engineering teams to all damaged areas," Jake announced over the ship's speakers. "We're not done fighting yet." As if to prove his point, the ship's weapons fired again, striking a Vorthen destroyer. The enemy ship's shields flickered and failed. The battle was far from over, but something had changed. The humans were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win, one repair at a time. Captain Lisa Hayes stood in the center of the bridge on the human cruiser Defiant Storm. Her ship was in bad shape. The main engine was making strange noises. Half the weapon systems were offline, and there were holes in the hull that you could drive a truck through. "Damage report," she said calmly, as if they were sitting in a safe harbor instead of the middle of a space battle. "It's not good, Captain," replied her first officer, Lieutenant Ron Arker. "We've got 17 hull breaches. The main engine is failing, and we're down to emergency power only." Lisa nodded and walked to the communications panel. "Engineering. Team to Deck 7. Bring the portable welders and all the spare parts we have." Ron stared at her. "Captain, we should fall back. The ship can't take much more damage." "The ship will take whatever we ask it to take," Lisa said firmly. "We just need to help it along." She activated the ship's internal speakers. "All hands. This is the captain. We're going to fix this ship while we fight. I know it sounds crazy, but we're humans. Crazy is what we do best." Down in the engineering section, Pete Williams was already suiting up for a spacewalk. He had volunteered to go outside the ship to fix the hull breaches. Going outside during a battle was dangerous, but Pete had fixed things in dangerous places before. "You sure about this?" asked his partner, Engineer Kate Brooks. "There's a lot of enemy fire out there." "I'm sure," Pete replied, checking his tool belt. "Besides, someone has to do it, and I'm the best welder on this ship." He wasn't bragging. Pete had been fixing things since he was 6 years old. His father had been a mechanic, and his grandfather before that. Working with his hands was in his blood. Pete stepped into the airlock and waited for it to cycle. Through a small window, he could see the battle raging around them. Vorthan ships were firing energy beams that lit up space like a deadly fireworks show. The airlock opened, and Pete pushed himself out into space. He was connected to the ship by a safety line, but he felt very small and alone among all those enemy ships. The first hull breach was about 50 feet away. Pete used his suit's thrusters to fly over to it. The hole was big enough for 3 people to walk through side by side. "This is going to take a while," he muttered to himself. Pete pulled out a metal plate from his tool bag. It was too small to cover the whole hole, but he could use several plates to patch it. He began welding the first plate in place while enemy. Fire flashed around him. Inside the ship, engineer Kate Brooks was working on a different problem. The main engine was overheating because the cooling system had been damaged. Without the engine, the ship would be sitting duck. For the Vorthan weapons. Kate looked around the engine room for something she could use. Her eyes landed on the ship's food preparation area. The kitchen had a large refrigeration unit that kept food cold for the crew. That might work, she said to herself. 20 minutes later, Kate had disconnected the kitchen's cooling system and was installing it around the main engine. It wasn't designed for this purpose, but cooling was cooling. "Brooks to bridge," she called on her radio. "Try the engine now." On the bridge, Lisa pushed the engine controls forward. The ship surged ahead, faster than it had moved all day. "Outstanding." "Work, Brooks," Lisa said. "What else can you fix?" "Give me a few more minutes, and I'll have the weapons back online," Kate replied. Outside the ship, Pete was working on his third hull breach when he saw something that made him stop. A small Vorthan fighter was heading straight for him, its weapons charging. Pete did the only thing he could think of. He threw his wrench at the fighter. The wrench hit the fighter's cockpit window and bounced off harmlessly. But the Vorthan pilot was so surprised that he lost control of his ship for a moment. That was all the time Pete needed to duck behind. A piece of damaged hull plating. The fighter fired at where Pete had been a second before, then flew away to look for bigger targets. "That was close," Pete said, retrieving his wrench. "But I've got work to do." Back on the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kilixer was watching the battle with growing concern. His ships were winning, but not as quickly as they should be. The human ships kept coming back to life after being damaged. "Status report," he ordered. "We have destroyed 6 human ships," reported his tactical officer. "But the remaining ships are proving more difficult than expected." "Difficult how?" "They keep repairing themselves during the battle. We damage a ship, and an hour later it's fighting again." Kilixer looked at his battle display. The human fleet was smaller than when the battle started, but the remaining ships seemed to be fighting harder than before. "Show me the human ship that we damaged at the beginning of the battle," he ordered. The screen switched to show the Iron Eagle. The ship looked completely different from when the battle started. It had new weapons mounted on its hull, extra armor, plating, and what looked like additional engines. "How is this possible?" Kilixer asked. "We're not sure, sir. They seem to be improving their ships as they fight." On the human ship Freedom's Edge, Chief Mechanic Danny White was doing exactly that. He had noticed that their main cannon was overheating after every few shots. Instead of just fixing the problem, he was making it better. Danny had taken cooling pipes from the ship's air conditioning system and wrapped them around the cannon. Then he had connected them to the ship's water supply. Now the cannon stayed cool no matter how fast they fired it. "White to bridge," he called on his radio. "The main gun is ready. You can fire it as fast as you want now." "How fast is that?" asked the captain. "Try me," Danny replied with a grin. The cannon began firing rapidly, sending shot after shot at the Vorthan ships. Other human ships saw this and began asking Danny how he had done it. "It's simple," Danny explained over the radio. "Don't just fix the problem. Make it better than it was before." This idea spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Engineers stopped just repairing damage and started improving their ships. Weapons became more powerful. Engines became faster. Defense systems became stronger. The Vorthan admiral watched in amazement as human ships began performing better than they had at the start of the battle. Ships that should have been destroyed were now among the most dangerous on the battlefield. "This is impossible," he said. "No species improves their ships during combat." "The humans do, sir," replied his science officer. "They're treating this battle like a learning experience." On the human ship Ranger's Pride, Captain Neil Johnson was learning that his crew could do things he never imagined. His ship's weapons had been completely destroyed, but his crew was building new ones from spare parts. "Johnson to all ships," he broadcast. "Anyone got spare weapon parts? We're building something new over here." Within minutes, small supply ships were flying between the human vessels, sharing parts and materials. The Vorthan pilots couldn't understand why humans were flying around during a battle to deliver packages. "They're not following any military doctrine we know," observed the Vorthan tactical officer. "They're making up their own rules as they go. And it's working," Keelixer admitted reluctantly. "Our ships are designed for quick battles. The longer this fight goes on, the more advantages the humans gain." The battle had been going on for 6 hours now. The Vorthan fleet was starting to run low on ammunition and energy. But the human ships seemed to be getting stronger every hour. On the new horizon, Commander Jake Morrison was coordinating the human response. His ship had been damaged and repaired so many times that it barely looked like the same vessel. "All ships, report status," he ordered. The responses came back from across the fleet. Every ship had damage, but every ship was still fighting. More importantly, many ships were fighting better than when the battle started. "Sir," said Amy Carter, "I think we're winning." Jake looked at the tactical display. The Vorthan fleet was still larger, but they were spreading out, taking defensive positions. The humans were still pressing forward, working together like a team. "Yes," Jake said, "I think we are." News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. On the planet Altair Prime, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered to discuss what their long-range sensors were detecting. "The readings must be wrong," said Ambassador Vextar, a tall blue alien with 6 arms. "Our sensors show that human ships are conducting major repairs during active combat." "The sensors are correct," replied the Xanthan delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree. "We have confirmed the data from 3 different monitoring stations." The council chamber buzzed with confused voices. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever attempted to repair their ships during battle. It was considered impossible, impractical, and completely insane. "Perhaps we should explain this to the humans," suggested the Krellian representative. "They may not understand proper space warfare protocols." "I don't think they care about protocols," observed the Altarian military advisor. "According to our data, they're launching maintenance robots at enemy ships and using them as weapons." Back at the battle, Admiral Susan Grant was commanding the human carrier Liberty Bell. Her ship was different from the others because it carried smaller fighter craft instead of big weapons. But her crew had found a creative way to use their maintenance robots. "Grant to all fighters," she announced. "Load up the repair bots and take them to the enemy ships." The human fighter pilots grinned as they received their orders. They had discovered that their maintenance robots were very good at finding weak spots in enemy hulls. A quick programming change had turned them into the strangest weapons in the galaxy. Pilot Jack Miller flew his fighter toward a Vorthan cruiser. Attached to his ship were 6 maintenance robots, each one programmed to find and exploit structural weaknesses. "This is Miller," he said into his radio. "Beginning maintenance. Robot deployment." He released the robots near the enemy ship. They flew toward the Vorthan cruiser and attached themselves to the hull. Within minutes, they were cutting through armor plating and disabling weapon systems. "Miller to base," he reported. "Robots are performing excellent maintenance on the enemy ship. They're taking it apart piece by piece." On the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kilixer was watching this with growing horror. "What are those things doing to our ships?" "They appear to be maintenance robots," replied his science officer. "But they're programmed to maintain the ships by dismantling them." "That's not how maintenance works." "It is for humans, apparently." Meanwhile, on the human ship Liberty Bell, something even more unusual was happening. The ship's hangar bay had been converted into a manufacturing facility. Sergeant Kate Brooks was leading a team that was building new fighter craft while the battle raged around them. "Brooks to engineering," she called. "We need more metal plates for the new fighters." "Coming right up," replied Chief Engineer Ron Parker. "We're cutting them from the damaged sections of the hull." Kate's team was using parts from damaged ships to build new ones. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The new fighters looked like they had been put together from spare parts, because that's exactly what they were. "These aren't regulation fighters," commented one of the pilots. "No," Kate agreed. "They're better. We built them specifically for this battle." The new fighters were faster and more maneuverable than the original designs. They had been built by people who understood what was needed in this particular fight. On the planet Zenthus, the military academy was in an uproar. Professors and students were watching the battle through their long-range sensors, trying to understand what the humans were doing. "This violates every principle of space warfare," said Professor Clickster, a renowned military strategist. "You cannot improve your ships during combat." "The humans are doing it," pointed out one of his students. "The humans are insane," the professor replied. "But they're also winning." The battle had been going on for 8 hours now. The Vorthan fleet was getting tired, but the human ships were getting stronger. Ships that had been easy targets at the beginning of the battle were now formidable opponents. Engineer Danny White aboard the frigate Brave Heart had created something that amazed even his fellow humans. Using parts from 3 different damaged systems, he had built a shield generator that was more powerful than the original. "White to fleet," he announced. "I've got the blueprint for improved shields. Anyone want a copy?" Within an hour, half the human fleet had upgraded their shields using Danny's design. The Vorthan weapons that had been effective at the start of the battle were now having trouble penetrating human defenses. "This is unprecedented," reported the Galactic Council's military observer. "The humans are sharing technology improvements in real time during combat." On the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kilixer was facing a problem he had never encountered before. His enemy was getting stronger as the battle continued. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the human ship that we nearly destroyed at the beginning of the battle is now one of their most powerful vessels." Kilixer looked at the display, showing the human destroyer Iron Eagle. The ship was covered in additional weapons, armor plating, and what appeared to be entirely new engine systems. "How many crew members do they have working on repairs?" "According to our scans, every human on every ship is involved in maintenance and improvement activities." "Even during combat?" "Especially during combat, sir." This was completely outside Kilixar's experience. In every other battle he had fought, damaged ships became weaker and eventually had to retreat. But human ships were becoming stronger and more dangerous. Captain Neil Johnson, commanding the destroyer Ranger's Pride, was proving this point. His ship's weapons had been completely destroyed early in the battle, but his crew had spent 4 hours building new ones from spare parts. "Johnson to fleet," he announced. "We've got a new type of cannon online. It's made from kitchen equipment and spare engine parts, but it packs a punch." The improvised weapon fired at a Vorthan cruiser. The shot hit so hard that it knocked out the enemy ship's shields completely. "How did you build that?" asked Captain Lisa Hayes from the Defiant Storm. "Easy," Johnson replied. "We took the high-pressure system from the kitchen dishwasher and connected it to a spare engine exhaust port. Then we loaded it with metal slugs from the machine shop. And it works? Better than our original weapons. Want me to send you the plans?" This kind of sharing was happening all across the human fleet. Engineers were creating new designs and immediately sharing them with other ships. The entire fleet was becoming a collaborative engineering project. The Galactic Council was trying to understand this phenomenon. "They're not just fighting a battle," observed the Krellian scientist. "They're conducting a massive research and development program. During combat," added the Altarian delegate, "they're using the battle as a test environment for new technology." On the human ship Freedom's Edge, Chief Mechanic Pete Williams was taking this approach to its logical conclusion. He had noticed that enemy fire was hitting his ship in predictable patterns. Instead of just repairing the damage, he was using it to improve the ship's design. "Every time they hit us, we learn something," he explained to his crew. "We see where the ship is weak and we make it stronger." The hull of the Freedoms Edge was now covered in additional armor plating that had been positioned based on where enemy fire was most likely to hit. The ship was becoming harder to damage with each passing hour. "Williams to fleet," he announced. "I'm sending you the locations where enemy fire is most effective. Add armor to those spots, and they'll have a harder time hurting you." The Vorthan Admiral was watching this with growing amazement and frustration. "They're using our own weapons fire to improve their ships," he said. "Yes, sir," replied his tactical officer. "Every shot we fire teaches them something new." The battle was now 9 hours old, and the character of the fight had completely changed. The Vorthan fleet was still larger, but they were no longer dominating the battlefield. The human ships had become custom-built fighting machines, each one uniquely adapted to the conditions of this particular battle. "Sir," reported the Vorthan science officer, "I'm detecting something unusual. The human ships are no longer identical to each other." "What do you mean?" "Each ship has been modified differently. They've become specialized for different roles." During the battle, Admiral Kilixer realized he was no longer fighting a standard fleet engagement. He was fighting against a group of engineers who happened to be flying warships, and they were winning. By the 10th hour of battle, the human fleet had become something that no alien species had ever seen before. Ships that had started the fight as standard military vessels were now unique fighting machines, each one modified and improved during combat. Engineer Danny White, aboard the frigate Braveheart, was working on his latest creation. He had taken parts from the ship's water recycling system, combined them with components from the communications array, and built a shield generator that was completely unlike anything in the technical manuals. "White to engineering," he called. On his radio, "Fire up the new shields." The shield generator hung to life, creating a protective barrier around the ship that shimmered with colors that had never been seen before. When a Vorthan energy beam hit the shield, it didn't just stop the attack. It absorbed the energy and made the shield stronger. "That's impossible," muttered the Vorthan science officer who was monitoring the battle. "Shields don't work that way." "Human shields do," replied Admiral Kilixer grimly. "Nothing about this battle follows normal rules." On the human carrier Liberty Bell, Admiral Susan Grant was watching her crew turn the ship's manufacturing bay into something that looked like a mad scientist's laboratory. They were building new types of fighter craft using parts from damaged ships, spare materials, and pure imagination. "Grant to manufacturing," she called. "How many new fighters can you build?" "As many as you need, Admiral," replied Chief Engineer. "Kate Brooks. We're not limited by the original designs anymore. We can build fighters specifically for whatever mission you have in mind." Kate's team had discovered that building custom fighters during battle was actually easier than trying to repair damaged ones. They could design each fighter for a specific task, using the exact parts and weapons that were needed. "I need 6 fighters designed to disable enemy engines," Grant said. "Give us 2 hours," Kate replied. "We'll build fighters that can shut down a Vorthan ship's power systems without destroying it." This was a completely new approach to space warfare. Instead of bringing pre-built ships to a fight, the humans were manufacturing weapons and vehicles during the battle itself. Captain Neil Johnson aboard the destroyer Ranger's Pride was taking this concept even further. His ship had been so heavily damaged that it barely resembled its original design. But instead of trying to restore it, his crew had turned it into something completely new. "Johnson to fleet," he announced. "We've converted our ship into a mobile repair facility. Any ship that needs major work can dock with us." The Ranger's Pride now had extending arms that could grab onto other ships and pull them close. The crew had set up repair stations all along the hull where they could work on multiple vessels at once. "This is like a floating garage," observed Lieutenant Amy Carter from the New Horizon. "They're treating space combat like automotive repair." "It's working, though," replied Commander Jake Morrison. "Our ships are staying in the fight longer because they can get fixed without leaving the battle area." The Vorthan fleet was struggling to understand what they were fighting against. Their ships were designed for quick, decisive battles. But the humans had turned this into a long-term engineering project. "Status report," ordered Admiral Kielixer. "We've been fighting for 10 hours, reported his tactical officer. "Our ships are running low on ammunition and energy. But the human ships appear to be getting stronger." "How is that possible?" "They're not just repairing damage, sir. They're improving their ships as they fight. Some of their vessels are now more powerful than when the battle started." On the human ship Iron Eagle, engineer Pete Williams was proving this point. His ship had been nearly destroyed at the beginning of the battle, but it was now one of the most dangerous vessels in the fleet. Pete had rebuilt the ship's weapons using parts from 6 different systems. The new weapons were more powerful, more accurate, and more efficient than the originals. He had also reinforced the hull using metal plates from the ship's internal structure. "Williams to fleet," he announced. "I've got plans for improved weapons. Anyone want to upgrade their firepower?" Within an hour, most of the human fleet had upgraded their weapons using Pete's designs. The Vorthan ships that had been dominating the battle were now facing weapons that were specifically designed to defeat their defenses. "This is beyond our understanding," admitted the Vorthan science officer. "They're evolving their technology in real time." The Galactic Council was watching the battle with amazement and concern. Representatives from dozens of species were trying to understand what the humans were doing. "They're not following any known military doctrine," reported the Xanthan military analyst. "They're treating warfare like a collaborative engineering project." "Is this legal?" asked the Altarian delegate. "There are no rules against it," replied the Krellian lawyer. "But no one has ever tried it before because it seemed impossible." On the human ship Defiant Storm, Captain Lisa Hayes was coordinating with her crew to turn their ship into a specialized anti-fighter vessel. They had studied the Vorthan fighter tactics and designed specific countermeasures. "Hayes to weapons," she called. "Deploy the new anti-fighter systems." The ship's hull bristled with dozens of small weapons that had been built specifically to target fast-moving fighters. When a group of Vorthan fighters approached, the weapons fired in coordinated patterns that made it impossible for the enemy. Ships to escape. Direct hits on all targets, reported the weapons officer. The new systems are incredibly effective. Captain Lisa smiled. Send the plans to the rest of the fleet. Everyone should have anti-fighter protection. This sharing of technology was happening constantly throughout the human fleet. Engineers were creating new solutions to problems and immediately sharing them with other ships. The entire fleet was becoming smarter and more capable with each passing hour. Chief Mechanic Ron Parker aboard the cruiser. Freedom's Edge had created something that amazed even his fellow humans. He had built a weapon that could repair friendly ships while damaging enemy ones. Parker to fleet, he announced. I've got a new type of energy beam. It fixes our ships and breaks theirs. How does that work? Asked engineer Danny White. It's programmed to recognize human technology and repair it, Ron explained. But when it hits alien technology, it tries to repair it using human specifications, which makes it fall apart. The weapon fired at a damaged human ship and immediately began fixing its hull breaches. Then it fired at a Vorthan cruiser and caused the alien ship systems to shut down as the beam tried to convert them to human standards. That's brilliant, said Captain Neil Johnson. You've turned repair work into a weapon. The Vorthan admiral was watching this with growing desperation. His fleet was designed to fight enemies who became weaker as they took damage. But the humans were becoming stronger, more organized, and more dangerous every hour. Sir, reported. His communications officer, we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They want to know if we need assistance. Admiral Kielixer looked at the tactical display. His fleet still outnumbered the humans, but the numbers were misleading. Each human ship was now worth several Vorthan ships in terms of fighting ability. Tell the Council we have the situation under control, he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. On the human flagship New Horizon, Commander Jake Morrison was coordinating the fleet's activities. His ship had been modified so many times that the original blueprints were useless. But it was now the most powerful vessel he had ever commanded. Morrison to all ships, he announced. We've been fighting for 10 hours, and we're just getting started. Keep improving, keep sharing, keep fighting. The human fleet had become something unprecedented in galactic history. It was a military force that became more dangerous the longer it fought. Each ship was a custom-built fighting machine, designed by its crew for the specific conditions of this battle. Sir, said Lieutenant Amy Carter, the enemy fleet is starting to fall back. Jake looked at the tactical display. The Vorthan ships were indeed retreating to a more defensive position. They were no longer pressing their attack. They're learning what we learned a long time ago, Jake said. Never fight humans who have access to spare parts and tools. The battle was entering a new phase. The humans had survived the initial assault and had turned their fleet into something the galaxy had never seen before. Now it was their turn to go on the offensive. When the battle finally ended after 12 hours of fighting, the human fleet had become something that no military strategist in the galaxy could have imagined. Ships that had entered the fight as standard military vessels were now unique fighting. Machines, each one modified and improved by its crew during combat. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, looking at the tactical display that showed the Vorthan fleet in full retreat. His ship had been rebuilt so many times during the battle that it was more powerful now than when the fight began. Damage report, he called out, though the term seemed almost meaningless now. We have no critical damage, replied Lieutenant Amy. Carter with a smile. Every system is functioning above normal capacity. Jake nodded. The human fleet had not only survived the battle, but had grown stronger during it. Each ship was now a custom-built fighting machine that had been designed by its crew specifically for this type of combat. On the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kielixer was staring at his tactical screens in disbelief. His superior fleet had been defeated by an enemy that had turned warfare into an engineering competition. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "the human commander is requesting to speak with you." Kelixer straightened his uniform and activated the communication system. Jake Morrison's face appeared on his screen. The human commander looked tired but confident. "Admiral Kelixer," Jake said, "I believe this battle is over. Are you prepared to discuss terms?" Kelixer looked at his fleet status. His ships were low on ammunition, energy, and morale. The human fleet was more dangerous now than it had been at the start of the battle. "We surrender," Kelixer said, his voice filled with both respect and confusion. "But I must ask, how did you do this? How did you turn a losing battle into a victory?" Jake smiled. "We did what humans always do when something is broken. We fixed it." The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy within hours. The battle became known as the Repair War, and it changed how every species thought about space combat. On the planet Altair Prime, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. "The humans have introduced a completely new form of warfare," reported the military committee chairman. "They treat their ships like tools that can be improved and modified during combat." "Is this something other species can learn?" asked the Xanthan delegate. "We don't think so," replied the committee's expert on human psychology. "This approach requires a specific mindset that seems unique to humans. They see problems as opportunities for improvement rather than obstacles to victory." The battle had lasted 12 hours, but its effects would last for generations. Military academies across the galaxy began studying human tactics. The concept of combat engineering became a new field of military science. Engineer Amy Carter, who had started the whole thing by welding hull plates during the battle, found herself invited to speak at the Galactic Military Academy. Her lecture on adaptive maintenance in hostile environments became required reading for officers throughout known space. "What we learned," she told the assembled delegates from dozens of species, "is that humans don't just fight battles. We solve problems. And when you're fighting for survival, everything becomes a problem that needs solving." The alien officers in the audience took careful notes, but many of them shook their heads. The human approach seemed too chaotic, too unpredictable for their organized military minds. Chief Engineer Pete Williams became famous throughout the galaxy for his hull repair work under fire. He was offered positions with a dozen different space fleets, but he chose to stay with the human military. "Other species want to hire me to teach their engineers," he explained to his friends. "But I don't think they understand what we really did out there. We didn't follow a plan. We made it up as we went along." Captain Neil Johnson, whose ship had been converted into a mobile repair facility during the battle, founded the first school for combat engineering. Students came from across human space to learn how to fix and improve ships during battle. "The key," he taught his students, "is to stop thinking about ships as finished products. Think of them as works in progress that can always be improved." The Borthan Empire, despite their defeat, became some of the biggest supporters of human military innovation. Admiral Kelixer himself wrote a book about the battle called "The Day Logic Failed: How Humans Changed Warfare Forever." "I commanded fleets for 40 years, he wrote, "and I thought I understood space combat. Then I fought the humans, and I realized I had been thinking about warfare all wrong. They don't just fight with their ships. They fight with their imagination." The human approach to warfare became known as adaptive combat engineering. Military theorists wrote papers about it, but few species could actually implement it. The human ability to improvise and improve under pressure seemed to be unique among galactic civilizations. Engineer Danny White, who had built the improved shield generator during the battle, became the head of human fleet engineering. His job was to encourage the kind of creative problem-solving that had won the battle. "We're not trying to build perfect ships," he explained to new recruits. "We're trying to build ships that can become perfect during combat." The Galactic Council eventually created new rules for space warfare that took human tactics into account. The Morrison Doctrine stated that any ship could be modified during combat as long as it didn't violate basic safety protocols. But the real impact of the battle was psychological. Every species in the galaxy now knew that humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and dangerous when given access to tools and spare parts. "Never fight humans who have a workshop" became a common saying among alien military officers. The human fleet that had survived the battle became the foundation for a new kind of space navy. Ships were designed to be modified and improved during combat. Every vessel carried extensive repair facilities and spare parts. But more importantly, every ship carried engineers who thought like Pete Williams, Danny White, and Amy Carter. Engineers who saw damaged systems as opportunities for improvement rather than problems to be fixed. Commander Jake Morrison was promoted to Admiral and given command of the entire human space fleet. His first order was simple: every ship should be better after a battle than it was before. The Battle of Vorthen became a turning point in galactic history. It showed that humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were problem solvers who could turn any situation to their advantage if given enough time and spare parts. Years later, when alien students studied the battle, they always asked the same question: how did the humans know their tactics would work? The answer was simple: they didn't. They just started fixing things and kept fixing things until they won dot from that day forward. No galactic power ever made the mistake of thinking that damaged human ships were defeated human ships. Because humanity had proven something important to the galaxy, they could turn a losing battle into a victory using nothing but tools, spare parts, and the kind of stubborn determination that kept them working even when the universe was trying to blow them up. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about humanity. When humans said they were going to fix something, they meant it. Even if that something was a losing battle in the middle of space, surrounded by enemies, with nothing but scrap metal and imagination to work with. The humans had shown the galaxy that sometimes the best weapon is a good engineer with a toolbox and the refusal to give up. And that lesson would echo through space for generations to come.